Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Whole Truth. The Whole Truth is a Thai mystery horror thriller that tells a story of a pair of students named Put and Pim who attend high school like any other student would. Shortly after a big job promotion, their mother Mai suffers from a car accident and goes into a coma, after which their grandparents begin to care for them in her absence. It's not long after the siblings move in with their grandparents that weird things start to occur in the house. A strange hole appears in the living room wall where supernatural events take place on the other side, which reveal long buried secrets that threaten to unravel the family. The movie does start off on the right foot, with its ordinary characters being placed in extraordinary situations, and the mystery element to the story does provide an incentive for viewers to keep watching. Unfortunately, it repeatedly trips over itself trying to maintain suspense where it's nowhere to be found, and it's either too convoluted or vague to make complete sense of its story. There were many times where I had to pause the movie just to be able to process what was happening on screen. It left me with more questions than I had answers, which is probably the one thing a mystery thriller shouldn't do. The characters felt incomplete, and their conclusions were not satisfying. The first character, Put, doesn't have much in the way of personality. He is likable in a sense that bad things happen to him and we want to see him overcome them, but it's not enough. The only distinguishing traits he has is that he's an artist and one of his legs is different from the other, so he has to walk while wearing a brace. They're not brought up all that much until closer to the end of the movie, and when they are, the payoff doesn't work. The other lead character, Pim, was a bit better than Put, but only because I felt bad for how she was involved in a subplot between Put and another character who I'll mention later. Outside this, you'd be forgiven for thinking that she was Put's twin sibling because she is just as bland as he is. Neither of them have any redeeming qualities as characters, which makes it difficult for me to root for them as they're trying to solve the mystery of the house. I do empathize with them to a degree when they come to harrowing revelations behind their family, but the build-up takes too long to happen. The grandparents play a key role when it comes to the inexplicable events that take place inside their home. The grandfather is a retired police officer mourning the medical state of his daughter, while the grandmother suffers from dementia and is required to take pills to maintain some sense of normalcy. What puzzled me about their involvement, at least at first, was how the kids hadn't even met them before until the day of the accident. I was initially put off by this, but as more details became unveiled, the story started to make some sense as there was a reason behind why their mother hadn't said anything. This was the only detail about them I could appreciate though. The grandmother's dementia felt inconsistent in its portrayal. She flipped back and forth between being confused and being lucid without any rhyme or reason. Beyond these instances, there isn't much for her to do other than scold the siblings like their children. As for the grandfather, there isn't a whole lot for him to do either. He does have one subplot where he's trying to be a vigilante and kill the person who's responsible for putting his daughter into a coma, but it's spread too thin across the rest of the main narrative to bother getting invested in it. Really, all the characters were just bland, boring, and for some of them the acting was kind of bad. I feel bad for saying that because there is some attempt to add depth to them, but they all fall flat. None of the interesting, juicy secrets behind them get revealed until the final act, which is where the movie starts to go way off the deep end and become overburdened with exposition. This leads me to talk about the supernatural mystery that props up the main story. Once again, there's nothing special about it. There's a child ghost on the other side of the wall that the siblings peer into who provides clues as to what happened in her life, but the siblings are unbelievably stupid when it comes to interpreting them. I immediately noticed within the first few seconds of Put looking inside that it was a similar version of the living room he was in, albeit much darker and scarier in presentation. In this movie, it takes over an hour for the two to figure that out, and they keep talking about a girl dying in the house next door when there's no introduction to that house at any point. Their heads are all over the place when it comes to their investigation. Half the time, it feels like they spend more time worrying about their cat being lost than some of the freakish noises that are produced by the ghost. There's no sense of urgency to be found, even though the pair regularly experience issues. And this goes back to the ghosts and the horror elements that are supposed to be attached to it. I say supposed to because the ghost simply wasn't scary. All it does is lure the siblings across the house with gross noises, stands around, and then pukes a bunch of blood and dies. The first time was a bit unnerving, but this occurs multiple times, so it wears thin real quick. It's a shame that this is the only trump card it has, because the potential is there for a solid horror film. The lighting is on point as rooms remain dark to reflect the torment of the ghost within the walls, while occasional first-person sequences fade to and out of black, immersing the audience in the ghost's perspective in what I thought was a nice technique. But some of the cute filming tricks get get overshadowed by the abundance of cliches and stereotypes. Anytime something remotely suspenseful happens, it's almost always accompanied by a loud dun sound effect, which completely ruins whatever vibe a scene is trying to convey. And regarding stereotypes, there's a bully named Fame who masquerades as a friend of Putt just so he can try to have sex with his sister Pim, and threatens to send a certain video to everyone at school if Putt doesn't cooperate. His boorish attitude is about as cliche as a blackmailer's could be, and he disappears after the first half hour of the movie, rendering his character pointless. Then there's the matter of the movie's ending, which I already hinted at being unsatisfactory, but that's just scraping the surface. It suffers from a case of information overload in which the grandparents dump a ton of exposition in the character's laps to digest, while ignoring previously mentioned bits like the wormhole theory. While I was disappointed with this movie's pacing, I think it could have worked if it was much shorter. At 2 hours in length, there's just too little that happens in the first 2 acts, which results in a bewildering third act. If it were able to trim its runtime by 30 minutes or so, I think the story would have fared better in the long run. Overall, The Whole Truth is a movie whose truth remains obscure even after it's all said and done. It is earnest in its attempts to be suspenseful and scary, but it comes off more as tedious and melodramatic. If you enjoy thrillers with supernatural themes, you might find yourself enjoying this to some extent, especially if you're a fan of mysteries, but for me, there were too many twists, turns, and cliches that hampered my enjoyment of the experience. I like the idea of using a mystery to entice audiences to keep their eyes glued to the screen, but everything else that happens prior to the big reveal lulls my eyes to sleep. Stereotypical characters, poorly executed horror, and a boring story keep it from reaching its full potential. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of The Whole Truth. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Polish Christmas family film, David and the Elves. Bye bye!